And I found out that if I kind of didn't pay attention, but I ran my hand right above their bodies, I pretty much found out where their pain was. And I go, oh, you mean you're hurt? You hurt right here. And I would put my hand on wherever that is. And they would say, yes. And I would do something and the pain would go away. And they would look at me like, wow, that was amazing. And they would walk out of my office and I would be standing there in some way dumbfounded going, what just happened?
Hi, and welcome to the Heart Leader Podcast, where heart and mind align. I'm your host, Amber, and today I have the honor of being joined by James Kawainui. He is an ancient spiritual wisdom shaman from Hawaii. He is native from Hawaii, and he comes from a long lineage of shamans. So, James, I just want to thank you for being here first and foremost.
Thank you for having me. I'm really honored to be here this morning. So thank you.
All right. So I have to say, being able to say your name in itself is a practice.
You know, the easy way to look at the Hawaiian language is that it's very phonetic. And so if you take everything and you break it down into syllables, it becomes really easy. So if you look at the name, then it's Ka-wai-nui, just like Honolulu or Kauai or Maui or whatever it is. So if you take it and you break it down like that, there's only 12 alphabets. 12 letters in the alphabet. So there's not much to get or to that'll kind of confuse you or anything else like that. But that's one way to look at it. So like when you think about Kalana Ana Ole Highway, which is a highway on Oahu, it's taking those pieces and then breaking them into those syllable words. So it makes it easy. Just like this, one of the things I talk about is the idea of aloha. Everybody has their understanding of that, and yet aloha in itself is two words. One is alo, which means to share, and ha, which means breath. And so when Hawaiians actually say aloha, what they're actually saying to you is that the connection that we have with each other is so amazing that I will share my life breath with you. That's really what aloha means.
That's just amazing. What I take from it, and as I was reading through your site, and there are all of these Hawaiian words that are on there, like it is a mindfulness practice to really take the time to look at it and break it down like that. So you're really phonetically putting the emphasis where it is meant to be. And that's part of what I love about Sanskrit as well, like these languages that really bring your attention into the word itself and the energy of the word. That's what I get from it. Like there's an energy to these words. It's not just what's coming out of your mouth. Yeah. It is what the word represents energetically. And that's what I took from it.
And I understand completely about Sanskrit because Ashana has done a deep dive into Sanskrit for like the last 4 or 5 years. And so we talk about that all the time, about the importance of it's the sound current really that comes out of it. The Hawaiian language is the same way because one word may have 7 or 8 different meanings and more. The Hawaiians were very good at describing things. And so just as an example, it's said that the Hawaiian language has 200 different variations of rain or wind or the clouds. They called rain the rain that flows gently from the mountain to the ocean, the rain that comes down as a torrent, the rain that looks like mist, the rain that comes off the ocean, the rain that comes with wind. They all have different words. They all have different meanings. So it's not just rain.
That is the beauty of actually being mindful, how even rain has its own unique personality.
The mindfulness that we had as a culture because of the limited resources that we had, to think that when Cook landed and we had first European contact, back in 1776, I think it was. They estimated that they were between three quarters and 750,000 to a million Hawaiians living in Hawaii, right? And they did not, and very self-sufficiently. And so that idea of mindfulness and taking care of the land and taking care of the people, taking care of the resources that they had there available to be, so that everybody lived, I want to say as abundantly as they could, or just from a place of prosperity and vitality. Let's just say it that way.
Where at least everyone had enough.
Everyone had enough, and they understood the limited, that the resources that they had were limited. So it was about being in stewardship. Even when you would consider the ali'i class, which were the rulers and the chiefs in Hawaii, it was about the stewardship that they had to the people in the land.
I want to dive more into that. To me, that's part of what helped me get in alignment with myself, even was understanding that I am part of the land that I am connected to, not just separate from. And that included people would come over to my house and they're like, oh, you have this beautiful home. And I'm like, no, I don't have it. At any point, nature can take this away from me. I am living in an illusion if I think I own this space, because there could be some major thing that happens at any moment, and I will learn very quickly that the earth owns this plot of land that I'm on. But I have been gifted this opportunity to be in stewardship of this land, and it is a part of me. Therefore, I can understand who I am in conjunction with this space that I am a part of. And when I read through your site, I very much got the vibe that that's in conjunction with what you do. So can you talk a little bit about that?
You're right, because we are so temporary and in relationship to everything that's around us. And so realizing that we are here for that time, and what we do with that time. I mean, we do that as people, right? Some of the things that I see when I work with people is that they come to a place in their life where they feel that they've accomplished, or they're successful, and yet there's an emptiness that's inside of them. And that emptiness is that place of having lost sometimes that connection. And so being able to find that connection, and to be able to look at that in a way that goes, okay, I'm here. At some point, hopefully everybody realizes that we're here in service to each other, right? And so how do I leave, or what do I leave here, or in place of me or my energy when I'm no longer here? In other words, the legacy that I leave, right? The way that we treated people, the way that we treated the surroundings that we live in, the way that we treat ourselves. Because I think that there's a big disconnect inside of that, and the reason why maybe people don't understand or have been able to feel or connect to the oneness is because there's a disconnect inside themselves. I think that's something that you see as well in the work that you do. And I know that I see that every day. And it's something that we all not struggle with. Struggle is not the right word. I think that's what we all become more and more aware of. And so then the journey becomes this idea of how can I be more present inside of what I'm doing, not just outwardly, but inwardly as well, too.
I love that. You use what you call ancient wisdoms. What in the Native Hawaiian culture, what are some of those ancient wisdoms? I know I've studied many different, but this is one that I've not had the opportunity to dive into. So I'm like eager to really learn more about Hawaiian shamanism, if you can share.
Yeah, and I don't think and you understand this, and it's not just about the Hawaiian culture, but I think indigenous people in general, right? So this idea of, it's funny because in our modern lives we think that we're discovering things, And the reality is that in a lot of indigenous cultures, the understanding of the wisdom was always there. And so one of the ways that I look at that and how I say it is, it's ancient wisdom for living a modern life. And so it's bringing that idea of those pieces. And I think one of the things that we were talking about before this is where you were saying the words that some of the precepts or the concepts that I used for myself, which was the concept of lokahi, the concept of ha, the concept of pono, or aloha. You and I, so we had to talk about aloha. But it's those understandings of how do we, because those are all the basis for how we live our life. Lokahi is about unity, so it's about connecting to other people. Ha is about living in humility, so it's about how do I live a humble life, not from a place of being less than, because ha is actually about being assertive inside of my knowing of that while I am humble. So there's a difference between being humble and being arrogant, and where we stand inside of that. And then pono, which is a really amazing concept, and pono is the idea of right action. And so, I know that the theme that and what you guys are talking about is about authenticity. So when I watched the podcast last week, you guys were really talking about that authenticity and that the idea of pono, which is right action, right? We're not being, or I don't know how to say this. Maybe the way to say this is to tell a story. That's a good way to do this.
Love stories.
When I lived in New Zealand for a few years, and I knew I was going to go down there. Before I went down there, when I got invited to go, I thought it was great. I went for 3.5 months and ended up living there for 5.5 years, which was a really interesting process. Right after I got there, soon after I got to New Zealand, I heard and got told that I was supposed to meet this Maori healer who was very well known there. There were things that were happening in my life, and I have so many stories because there were so many things that happened while I was there. But the point is, I didn't get to meet him until he had passed. Let's just put it that way. He had transitioned out of his body. And after he transitioned out of his body, I was introduced to one of his students who had been studying with him for a really long time. That was my first mentor. He became my student. And we had a group of people that were part, they call it a ropu, which is a group of healers that work together. And so we were studying the Maori wisdom and the healing understandings and the spirituality of all of that. And inside of our group, there was a woman who was a medium. And so one day, her name was Peg, and one day she walked up to me and she said, "Papa wants to talk to you." And as soon as she said that, I understood that Papa had already transitioned, and he'd been transitioned for 2 years, but she said he wants to talk to you. I said, okay. I was at that point in my life where when things started happening like this, I wasn't surprised anymore. I just said, all right, I'm just going to go with this, right? And so I would come and we would sit at her kitchen table and we would chat, and Papa would talk to me through her. So he would talk to me about what I was doing. He helped me introduce me to some of my ancestors, and he would bring people in to talk to me and tell me about things that were going on through Peg, and as I was understanding the pieces inside of that. But he said something to me that really got me to look at what was going on. And one day he said to me, I had done a session with somebody a few days beforehand, and he called me on it because as I was sitting there talking to me, he said, you were working on this woman the other day, and you got to a place inside of your session where you saw this, and I don't remember exactly what it was, but you did this instead. And he said, why did you do that? And that was a point when I went, oh my God. He knew how I was feeling and what I was doing, and he was calling me on it. And that was the point and he said, you have to realize that we're always watching. That was the day that I really got to understand that my ancestors were working through me to do the work that I had, and that they were there. And so in order for me to do that work, I had to show up in a way where I was pono, I was in right action with everything, right? And not only that, but that integrity and that authenticity of that were in some ways defining the work that I do.
And for someone like me, I feel the gift of that lineage. And I'll say not just here, the earthly lineage, but like the eternal lineage. But I am going to call out because I've had more than one person say, isn't it creepy that they're always watching us? Like, that's so I like what happens when we go to the bathroom? Are there beings that are watching us? Are there people who are watching? Like, I want to know that I can take a shower. So I want to kind of actually talk about that because it is this beautiful gift and it isn't anything that we should be afraid of or thinking that they're creeping on us and stalking us from the ether realm. So do you have
yeah,
any
it's
insight
yeah,
on that?
it's not that way that with the stalking, because you have to remember that when in those realms, right, in those dimensional realms, and with the connections that we have with the teachers and the guides that we have, comes from a place of pure love. And so there's nothing demeaning or undermining about any of that. And so they're not looking at that the way that our earthly human minds would be thinking about it. Because when we think about that, that's where that thought is coming from. That thought is coming from this earthly human mind that says, well, wait a minute, are they intruding on my privacy or anything else like that? And that's probably the farthest from what they're thinking about, because they're looking at us as the light being that we are. And what they're wanting is to be able to help us to be that embodiment of love, that embodiment of light, that embodiment of compassion and kindness, or whatever that is. And I've been called on it before many times where I've done things that were not in alignment with that, and literally got my butt kicked for not paying attention. So there is that piece. And then there's another part of this that to understand as well is that they're not allowed to intervene in that way. They are there as guides, and yet they cannot intervene unless you're really making a mess of something and you're getting ready to put yourself in a very compromised or jeopardized position. And I've had that happen several times in my life where I was about to get really hurt and literally felt the hand that moved me out of the way. And I always say this, and I said, I think my team had to work overtime to keep me here, because there are lots of things that I did in my life that, for all practical purposes, I shouldn't be here anymore because of some of the crazy choices that I've made in the past. So to remember that they are here in that form of guides and guardians and your ancestors for your benefit. That makes sense.
Yes, and I align with that so thoroughly. And I thank you for being willing to speak to the human thought aspect of it because it's normal. We're human. And the more that we can place that into, okay, yeah, the questions are going to arise. It's okay that they do. Ask them. Don't suppress it. Ask it, because then you can move through it and have a clear understanding of they don't align the way that we align. Our guides, our ancestors are in a different space than we are. So they look at things differently. And the beauty is we get to receive that different point of view.
And that is the beauty of it. And yeah, because they're not confined to the human mind, right? And that's really what happens. The human mind is that this is that confining. In some ways, people think that we have to create parameters, and people talk about being inside of boxes, but they're parameters, but of being human, or being in a human body, or being in this dimensional reality, however you want to look at all of that, right? And the reality is that they don't have those confines. So the idea of the human being on the ground and the ego flying overhead, right? So from their point of view, they have a perspective of everything around us that we don't. It's just like standing outside of a building and then being on the 30th floor of the building. From the 30th floor, you see way more than you do. Even from the second floor, you see more than you do standing on the ground, right? And that's what we're allowing ourselves to connect to, is that higher perspective.
So beautifully said. Now, did you come out of the womb like this?
Oh my gosh, no.
Can you share? Because this is the understanding of how to align with the authentic self. And it's clear. I mean, we all have moments where we have to realign because we get knocked off center. But how did you get to a point where you could embrace this part of yourself? Because it's not easy when it's not the norm, right? When you have to go against the grain in order to be who you are. So how did you get to that point?
I laugh and I say this, but up until the point that I woke up, let's just put it that way, I led a pretty unconscious life, a life that would be most of humanity, right? I grew up in a very tumultuous household. I had a very, very strict stepfather. So I was the subject of a lot of physical and psychological and emotional abuse when I was growing up. So much so that the way that I talk about it and look at it now is that he stripped me of my sense of self. So much so that I couldn't wait to get out of there. So I left when I was 18. I joined the military because it was the only way that I could see myself getting out. I ended up being away from Hawaii for 25 years. Met someone, got married, moved to Florida. I didn't know how to create those energetic boundaries between my stepfather and myself, so I used it by doing it geographically. So I moved about as far away as I could and still be in the United States from where I grew up. In the process of that, I did all the things that you're supposed to do or not supposed to do when you're growing up, because I did and dealt drugs. I will say that right up front. That was part of my younger life. I was a rebel. My father was, I laugh and I say this now, but my father lived on the wrong side of right and wrong. And growing up, what it felt like, as I was able to go back and look at it, we were being trained to be criminals, because in my stepfather's family, it was okay not to do the right things. Let's just say it that way. And so I moved away from that for a really long time. But in the process of that, I raised a family. I started working for a company, and I ended up working for them for 17 and a half years. Started at the bottom in production, and I ended up in a very upper level management position where I answered to the president of our division. I ran 3 departments. There were people that I was in charge of. And I kept thinking that this is the life I was supposed to have. This is the life I was supposed to have. It was success. There was the financial success. There was the prestige of the job and moving through the ranks and everything else like that. But I was working really long hours. Like I worked 60 or 70 or 80-hour weeks. And so when I worked a 60-hour week, it was like, wow, I celebrated, because that was only 60 hours that I worked. And my ex-wife now, but my wife at the time, said to me at one point, "I'm watching your soul die." And I didn't understand what she was saying, because I was still embedded inside of that, flying around in a corporate jet, having big dinners with our clients, sitting around with the boys, smoking fat cigars and drinking after hours and everything else like that. And was a measure of success. And then something happened to me, and I came home after a really long week, and I was sitting at home on a Friday evening, and I had my first clairaudient experience. And somebody walked up, and they literally went like this, and he tapped me in the back of the head, and I heard a voice that said, "It's time to go home." And I turned around, and I knew that it was only my wife and I at the time. And I said, "Did you hear that?" And she said, "Hear what?" I said, "I just heard a voice." And I looked at her and I said, "What the F are we doing here?" And she said, "I don't know." And so I walked in the kitchen and I called my sister in Hawaii and I talked to her and I said, I think I'm coming home. And I walked into my boss's office the very next day and I quit my job. I walked away. I had no idea what I was going to do. I had no idea where this is going to lead, but I knew that I couldn't do what I was doing anymore. And even before that had happened, there's a sort of an awakening that was happening, because about 2 or 3 years before that, people started showing up in my office, and they would show up in my office and they would say, I'm in pain. And I found out that if I kind of didn't pay attention, but I ran my hand right above their bodies, I pretty much found out where their pain was. And I go, oh, you mean you're hurt? You hurt right here. And I would put my hand on wherever that is. And they would say, yes. And I would do something and the pain would go away. And they would look at me like, wow, that was amazing. And they would walk out of my office and I would be standing there in some way dumbfounded going, what just happened? And then what happened was people started showing up and they would close my door and they would start talking to me about their life. And I'm sitting across the desk from them and they're telling me about all these things that are happening, not good things that are happening in their life. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what am I supposed to do with this? And they would sit and they would talk and something would happen. And then they would look at me and they'd go, wow, thank you so much. You're so helpful. And they would stand up and they would walk out of my office and I would go, what just happened here? And so all of this was happening and I didn't understand it. And at the same time, right as that was happening, somebody said, I want to send you to, I want to pay for you to go to massage school. They said, there's something that's inside of you. And this is right when emotional release therapy was just coming out. They said, I know that you're going to be really good at that. And I went home and I told my wife, I want to go. I mean, literally, they were going to pay for me to go through school to get my license. And she looked at me and she had every reason to do this because, again, I was living out of integrity. She said, the only reason you want to do this is because you want to put your hands on other women. And that was not entirely not true. So there was a place of that not being authentic inside of that. And yet, when we moved back to Hawaii, sold everything that we had, moved back to Hawaii, and for 4 years, I lived in a shack on the beach, literally a shack. It was a 20 by 20. It was plywood walls. They went up about 3 feet. The rest of it was screened. There was a tin roof over the top with no electricity and no running water. So I went from this life of excess to living in that way. But the ocean was about 75 feet from my porch. So I went to sleep every night listening to the ocean. I lived in a very special place. I lived on the south end of Kealakekua Bay. So if everybody knows, on the Big Island, Kealakekua Bay is where Captain Cook's monument is. So the land for me ancestrally has so much energy. I didn't know that at the time. I just knew that I was connected. I mean, I knew every inch of that beach. I could close my eyes and I could go wherever I needed to go or wanted to go on that beach. And I lived that way for 4 years. And in that 4 years, it was the dumping of my old life so that the new life could come in.
To me, that's such an amazing story of dedication to self.
It was my first practice in surrender. So, we talk about authenticity, but we also talk about surrendering, because there's an energy or a power there's an energy or power that's greater than who we are. Yet most of the time we're afraid to even step towards it, much less allow it to become a part of our lives.
Now, I'm estimating that you don't recommend for all of your clients to take 4 years and live on the beach.
No, and I say that when I talk to them now, because I said the reason that I did that at the time was because I didn't have the tools. I didn't have the tools. I didn't have the necessary tools. I didn't have the mindset. I had no understanding of that. And so I say, let's not do that. Let me help you. There's another way. And so when I work with the people, the people that come to me in my mentoring program, and then I have a mentoring program for business executives, entrepreneurs, CEOs. And those are the people that get to that point in their lives, and then they realize that there's an emptiness inside. and there's something that they're missing, but they don't know what that is, right? And I say, let me help you. Let me share some tools with you. Let's look at how your mind is put together. I guess that's an easy way to explain it, right? Because we all are the result of the stories that became part of who we are as we were growing up. And not only that, not only the stories that we created, but the stories that were given to us, right? A lot of my work is about cellular memory. A lot of my work is about that generational patterning and the generational trauma that we inherit. I had That's a personal journey that I went through and continue to go through, because the more I explore that, the more I understand some of the reasons and the choices that I made in my life.
Sometimes we just want to forget it. We want to suppress it. It would be so easy for you to have said, I walked away from that childhood. I joined the military. I left. I want nothing to do with that. I never desire to look back.
Well,
But
true and not true. There's
yeah,
a part that's true and there's a part that's not true about that. And the part that's not true about that is that even though you leave, doesn't mean that it leaves you.
exactly.
I wrote a story. One of the things that I've been doing over the last 2 years is I've been part of several collaborative book projects, and I wrote a story about my stepfather, and I said, even though he had not been in my life for 30 years, he was still in my head.
Yeah.
He was still dictating the choices that I made, because I made all those choices from that place of lack of self-confidence and the doubt and the judgment and everything else. Right? He taught me how to be critical and judge myself. So even though he wasn't there personally doing it, it was his voice that was driving a lot of the things that were happening in my life.
And I think this is where energetic boundaries can come into the discussion, because
And
that
trauma, and the releasing and the recognizing of the trauma in our lives.
exactly. So can you talk a little bit about that and how it goes into aligning even with our authenticity? If we have someone in our head and in our heart and the memories in our body, and we haven't put up enough energetic boundary to get into our space, that can play a role in this. So can you talk a little bit about that?
I think one of the biggest pieces inside of that to understand, first and foremost, is that we're not even aware that those patterns are running. We're not even aware that when someone says something to me, I literally, I'm not seeing the person that's in front of me. I'm listening to the voice from my past. And so we talk about being authentic, but at the same time, because of, you can call it whatever you want, patterns, you can call it scripting, whatever it is, it's preventing me from being present. And so if we want to talk about authenticity, the first place I think we need to talk about is about, am I present? Am I really present in my life in this moment? Right? And I give the example of this a lot of times to people, and when I'm talking, when I'm doing a presentation or up on stage or however that is, and I look at people and I say, how many of you have had the experience of getting off of work and then all of a sudden you're in your driveway and you don't realize or remember how you got home, but you're in your driveway? And so the reality is that even though I'm driving, and thank goodness there was part of me that was watching out what was happening, because I avoided accidents. I stopped when I needed to stop. I got out of the way when I needed to get. I turned where I needed to turn. And here I am sitting in my driveway. Yet where was your mind when that was happening? Because you weren't present. When those patterns show up in our lives, right? We are not present to this moment. It's interesting. I was working with a man yesterday from Maui. Beautiful man. He was a rolfer for 20 years. So, like, if everybody knows the process of rolfing, that is a very intense process, right? And he got sick about 4 years ago and had an operation. And I asked him yesterday, and one of the things that he said was, I'm not sure if I have the will to live anymore. I heard him, and I knew I couldn't ask this question in the moment, So I kind of put it to the side. But the question that I had in my head is, of that statement that he just made, is that really true? And so we went to this process because he was saying that because there was a mindset inside that had been embedded years and years ago that says that I can't have what I want. That was that disconnect that he had gotten because of not being loved by his parents and being left to basically fend for himself. And so we walked from that point backwards till we could see the place. And we did it in a way, we think that our minds are in control of our lives. But the reality is that what's running us is the emotion that's inside of our bodies. And so when I can become very aware or more aware or as aware as I can be of the emotion that's running, the more we are aware of that, then we start to really understand what's happening for us, right? Because he's saying that, and what I'm feeling inside of his body, because that's one of the ways that I work, is being able to feel where people are energetically. And I says, when you say that, what I feel is you contracting. I said, it literally feels like it's going like this, and it's rolling yourself into a ball, and all I feel is your energy contracting. I said, can you feel that? And because of the work that he'd done, he said, yes, I can feel the contraction. I said, good. I said, now, instead of contracting, what would it feel like for your energy to be neutral? In other words, to stop the contraction, right? And so we got to a place of stopping the contraction. And then I said, now, tell me something that you love, something that makes you smile, something that brings you joy. And he lives in Maui, so he says the mountain, right? And I got a picture of something else because he loves to swim, and I could feel the water moving over his body, and I could feel him and the way he felt. So we started working with that. And I said, so when you look at the mountain and the beauty that surrounds you where you live, what happens inside of you? And he felt his energy change, and he felt his energy start to expand. And I said, now we're actually present because you're paying attention to where you are and what's happening inside of your body. And I said, so now what would happen if we got everything down to a place where I started to recognize how I was feeling when I'm saying something? People say, I'm happy. And I hear that all the time, or I'm having a good day. And I hear happy, good day. But when I look inside, there's a disconnect. So if we're talking about being authentic, the word is not connected to the feeling, right? So authenticity is feeling what I'm saying. Authenticity is feeling what I am or what I'm being. So to make it really simple, right? We're either expanding our energy or we're contracting our energy. So can I get to the point where I recognize when something's happening around me, if I'm saying something, conversation, I'm thinking about it, something, I'm seeing something on TV, I'm reading something, if I'm contracting or expanding.
I love that because it gives a really quick check-in. Like, hey, do I feel like everything is pulling into me? Or do I feel like I'm going like this?
Expansion, right?
And I feel very fluid and expanded, and yes. And anyone can do that.
Anybody can do that when they pay attention, when we get to the point of paying attention. And this is the really cool thing about that, because you know what? Mind is not involved inside of that.
Yes.
Completely not involved inside of that. So I can't tell you what's going on because you're having the experience yourself. Sometimes it's really hard, though, to go from contraction straight into expansion, right?
Yeah.
So what I talk about is, can I at least come into neutrality? Yeah. So I come into a neutral space where I'm neither expanding or contracting, but it creates a stable point. Once I create the stable point, or once I come to the place where I'm slowing down, because there's an inertia, energy always is in motion. So that energy is moving, and it's moving in that way. So can I slow that energy down or stop it? And that is that place of being in neutrality, right? And as I'm neutral, the energy slows down, and then I can look towards the expansion and going, okay. And so I said, and so I kept So there were key words that we brought in for him. I said, so the mountain, the flower, the swimming. I said, because when I started talking about swimming, I said, I see you swimming. I feel the energy and how much, because he's been a swimmer for years. And that was one of the biggest things that he missed in his life, was the ability to go to the pool and go swimming 2 or 3 times a week, because he didn't have the energy to do that. I said, but I feel the water gliding over you. I can see you, and that rhythm of breathing and going down and breathing and your arms swinging over. And as I spoke to him about about the swimming, his energy just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And I said, now you feel that? And he said, yeah. I said, so is it really true that you don't want to live anymore? And he said, no. And I said, what do you feel? And before he said it, I heard the word hope. And he said, I feel lighter. I feel like there's a possibility. I said, yeah, I feel hope. And he said, you're right. It's hope. That's what I feel. And at the same time that all of that is happening, there's a part of me that's sitting back going, wow, look at this. Because every time I do this work, there's this place of awe. There's this awe because I'm watching things happen. And for me, what I get excited about, I mean, when he was done and I saw his energy field, I said, I was emotional. I said, I am so happy for you that I'm in tears right now because I feel the change in your body. And he smiled at me and he says, thank you. And I thank him. I thanked him. I said, thank you for just letting me be the witness to your shift inside of this place. Because he's an amazing author and he has 3 books and he doesn't have the energy to finish them. And I said, listen, man, you got a purpose here that is not yet completed. Can you see that? And he says, yes. I said, my goal is to get you writing again so that you can get this information out, so that you can share this with the world, because that's why you came here.
Amazing. Energetics of it, I think, are so very vital as you're talking about it. When we talk about authenticity, people are thinking about character traits, which are beautiful. But that's one component of authenticity. There's the energetic component. What energy do you desire to embody and put out into the world? And
because what you put out is what you're going to get back.
Yes. But we don't often discuss that. And so I'm very grateful that you're bringing that into this discussion.
It's a subtlety that we don't always pay attention to. Yet it's the foundation for everything that happens.
Very much so. So if someone was looking to dive deeper into that aspect, they're like, yes, I'm seeking to get to know more about who I am, including my lineage, including how that has helped form who I am in this present moment. How do they get a hold of you if they're listening to this versus watching it on one of our mediums?
You can reach out to me at james@jameskawainui.com. That's my direct email. And it comes straight to me. Kawainui is KAWAINUI.com. Or you can go to my website, which is just as easy. It's www.jameskawainui.com. And there's an opt-in form there that I created. I have several meditations that I've created, but there's an opt-in form that will give you the opportunity to have I created a meditation called the self-love meditation. And so for everybody that goes onto the website and they sign up for and when the opt-in pops up like that, you'll get that meditation. And if you want to, there's a contact form on there for anybody that reaches out to me that wants to have a conversation about that. I do free 30-minute consultations. So we can talk and you can tell me about what's happening, whether we work together or not. My goal is for you to be able to walk away with at least a piece of something that you can take, that you can incorporate into your life. So
that's an amazing gift.
So it's all about giving people tools so that they can manage their own lives. I tell people, I don't want permanent clients. That's not why I do this work. It's not about you seeing me forever. It's not about me doing anything for you. This is about you learning how to do this yourself and to empower and be empowered inside of your own life. That's really what I'm here to do.
Yes. And again, that comes back to the energetic principle of oneness, right? Which is a very beautiful thing.
We create the trickle effect. I remember the first time I saw the oneness in everything. It reminded me of something that had happened. But I was in a meditation when I was in New Zealand, and in the meditation, what happened was I saw the eye of a whale, and I had that experience because I swam with humpbacks when I was in Hawaii, and I had one day swim next to me, close enough that I watched her eye track me as she swam by me. And I'm talking about, just to have somebody look at you and their eyeball is about the size of a basketball, that goes right through you, and that'll change you. That changed my life. But in this meditation, I saw the eye of the whale, and when I went into the eye of the whale, then I saw the web, and I saw the sparks inside of the web, and I saw the interaction between everything, and I was sitting there the whole time going, oh my God, this is it. This is what it looks like. This action here creates some kind of ripple effect on this side, right? And that's really what the web is, and that's what oneness is, because every time we do something, there's a consequence, there's an action that happens at some other point.
Now I want to go swim with whales.
What right now is the peak of whale season in Hawaii. The humpback whales are the epitome of the what would you call them? The snowbird, the winter guest. They're the epitome of tourists because humpbacks go to Hawaii. All they do there is frolic, and calve and mate. They don't eat the whole time they're in Hawaii. So everything about Hawaii is a vacation for a humpback whale.
That's so interesting.
Because they live all summer in the Northwest or in the Gulf of Alaska, and so they feed and they do everything that they do, and they build up their stores, and then they come over starting in October, and they come to Hawaii, and they stay until about March and April, but they don't eat the whole time that they're there. So everything is about family, it's about connecting, it's about calving and that process of being in community, really, because that's what they're doing. And then they go back and do what they do.
That's incredible. We could take a note from that.
We could take a
I mean,
note
we do
from
need
that.
to eat, but other than that, yeah, just take time, be together as a family, frolic, play.
Be in community, because
Yeah.
it's so important, right?
So in our last few moments that we have together, because unfortunately this time went way too fast, we have all of our focus on becoming heart leaders, right? That we as a community can do both. Lead a life of love and connection, along with being intellectual and really understand how the mind can align with the heart. So when we discovered you, my amazing friend and heart leader, out doing what you were doing in our community and in our world, immediately, heart leader, sprang forward. What does that term invoke energetically within you when you feel it resonate being called one?
For me, the first thing that comes to mind when you ask me that question is the connection and the possibilities of connection that I have with the people that are around me. One of the things that I ask for when I wake up in my prayers every morning is, help me be a better person today than I was yesterday. It's something that I say to myself every morning. And so if I hold that understanding, that edict, right, as I move through my day, it's me sharing that with other people so that they have that as well. I mean, how hard is it really to smile at someone or to say hello? Or I always look at name tags, because when I talk to people and I say thank you and their name, and that's not hard because it helps people. That's where the connection comes. That's what in some ways, that's what being a heart leader is where can I share that, my aloha, right? Where can I share that aloha in every way that I do, everywhere that I go, in the conversations or the connections that I make. And it doesn't have to be really big things. It's not about raising lots of money or big organizations or anything else like that. It's the interaction that we have with the individuals that pass into our life or pass through our lives on a day-to-day basis. Some may only be fleeting. You may only see them for that one time. So you have that opportunity in that one time to make a difference.
But again, it goes back to that energy exchange, right? You never know where someone's at. If that energy that you share could bring them to that neutral point, if they're having that really bad day, as you expressed.
It changes, yeah. It slows down that contraction long enough for them to feel something different.
Well, thank you again for being here. And if you wouldn't mind sharing your website and email one more time.
www.jameskawainui.com. And email is just as easy, which is james@jameskawainui.com.
And we will make sure that everyone has access to it as they're on a site that has this. So if you're listening to it and you don't have access to a site right now, you can always go over to swivera.org and it will lead you to everything that you need to know about James and all of the amazing stuff that he has available on his website and through all of his services. We didn't get to touch on it, but he also does cleaning of spaces, your home, your office. He can help with energetic clearing of that. So maybe next time we have you on here, James, you can dive into that and some of the other amazing things that you offer through your site and through your services. So I want to thank each and every member of our Swivera community who tunes in and supports our organization. You know, we love each and every one of you. We do have our free tool this month, so don't forget to pop on over and download that free resource. We have a 30-day challenge to get to know you, and we're all taking part in that over on our group at Swivera Life. So we look forward to seeing you in there as well. Until next time, I'm your host, Amber, and we'll see you in the Swivera community.